There was a moment in history when time did not feel like it was slipping away, when days were not broken into notifications, alerts, and endless scrolling. Before phones lived in pockets and attention was constantly divided, life moved at a pace shaped by people, not machines. Mornings did not begin with glowing screens. They began with light through windows, familiar sounds from the street, and routines that had weight. People woke up without urgency. There was no pressure to check anything before the day could begin. The world waited. Streets filled slowly. Shops opened at the same hour every day. Miss it, and you waited. That waiting was normal. It did not create anxiety. It created patience. People walked to work with uninterrupted thoughts. On buses and trains, faces looked outward. Conversations happened without competing distractions. Silence was shared comfortably. No one felt the need to fill every moment. If nothing was happening, that was acceptable. Time was allowed to pass without being consumed. Meetings were intentional. You chose a place and a time, and that choice mattered. If someone did not arrive, there was no instant explanation. You waited, wondered, and eventually accepted it. Presence carried meaning because absence was possible. When people were together, they were fully together. Hands were empty, eyes met. Attention was not pulled away every few seconds. Children lived without constant supervision. They left homes and returned when the day ended. Trust was assumed. Freedom existed because fear had not yet been monetized. Evenings arrived quietly. Families gathered not because reminders existed, but because routine brought them together. Meals were shared without interruption. Conversations stretched. Sometimes silence took over, and no one felt uncomfortable because of it. Entertainment was limited, which made it valuable. A radio program, a single television channel. When it ended, the day ended with it. Darkness returned, streets quieted, homes became contained worlds. Life felt complete without needing to be documented. Memories were not captured. They were carried, retold imperfectly, changed slightly with time, but they remained alive inside people. Today it is difficult to imagine such a world without instant answers, without constant connection, without the feeling that time must always be optimized. But this world existed, not as nostalgia, as normal life. And once you truly see it, something becomes clear. Progress did not only give us more, it quietly took something away. It took patience, it took depth, it took the ability to be present without distraction. This story is not about rejecting technology. It is about remembering what everyday life felt like before time itself became fragmented. Because once phones arrived, the way people experienced moments, relationships, and even themselves began to change. And that change happened so gradually that almost no one noticed what was being lost. Phones, time was not something people tried to manage, save, or optimize. It simply existed, and people moved within it. Days were structured, but not compressed. There was a clear beginning and a clear end. Work started at a certain hour and finished at a certain hour, and when it ended, it stayed ended. There were no messages pulling attention back, no silent expectations of availability. Evenings belonged to personal life, not because of balanced strategies, but because there was no alternative. Distance existed naturally. If someone was not reachable, that absence was accepted. Waiting was not a flaw in the system, it was part of the system. Letters took days, sometimes weeks, and because of that delay, words were chosen carefully. You did not send a message just to fill silence. You sent it because it mattered. Anticipation stretched emotions across time. Joy, worry, curiosity all lasted longer because they were not resolved instantly. Social life grew from repetition, not constant contact. Seeing the same people in the same places built familiarity without effort. Relationships did not need maintenance through daily updates. They were maintained through shared experience. Miss someone, and you visited them. Arguments ended when people walked away, not when they continued endlessly through screens. Apologies happened face to face. Embarrassment existed in real time, which made people more careful with words. Children learned patience early. If they wanted something, they waited. If they were bored, they invented something to do. Imagination filled the spaces that technology would later occupy. Reading was immersive. A book could hold attention for hours because nothing interrupted it. Newspapers were read slowly, often more than once. Information arrived in limited amounts, and that limitation made it meaningful. People had time to think before reacting. Opinions formed gradually. Even loneliness felt different. It was quieter, less crowded. There was no constant comparison, no awareness of what everyone else was doing at the same moment. Life unfolded locally. What mattered was what was near. Streets, homes, workplaces, familiar routes. Identity was shaped by participation, not visibility. You were known because you showed up, not because you were constantly seen. The absence of instant connection did not isolate people. It grounded them. It allowed focus. It allowed stillness. It allowed people to exist without explaining themselves. When technology later promised efficiency, it also removed these natural pauses. Time began to splinter. Moments were shortened. Attention was pulled apart. The ability to sit with one thought, one feeling, one conversation weakened. What had once been normal now feels almost impossible. But it is important to remember that this slower way of living was not a luxury. It was simply how life worked. And it shaped how people understood time, relationships, and themselves in ways that are difficult to recreate once they are gone. In the time before phones became extensions of the human hand, presence was not something people talked about. It was simply how life worked. When someone stood in front of you, they were fully there. Their attention was not divided. Their hands were empty. Their eyes did not drift toward glowing screens. Conversations carried weight because they could not be paused, edited, or resumed later. Words mattered more because, once spoken, they could not be taken back. Silence mattered too. Awkward pauses were not instantly erased. They were endured, sometimes even respected. Relationships were built through shared time, not constant access. You could go days without hearing from someone and still feel connected, because connection was not measured by frequency. Distance did not mean neglect. It meant life was unfolding elsewhere. Trust filled the gaps where communication was absent. Communities functioned without announcements or updates. People recognized patterns. The same faces passed by at the same hours. A missing routine was noticed. Concern was quiet and practical. Someone knocked on a door. Someone asked a neighbor. Care did not need to be displayed. It simply happened. Children learned how to read real emotions, not filtered ones. They watched how adults spoke, argued, reconciled. They learned tone, posture, timing. Social skills formed through observation, not instruction. Conflicts ended when people physically left the space. Regret was felt immediately, not delayed by distance. Apologies required courage because they were face-to-face. Forgiveness was tangible. A handshake, a nod, a shared silence that closed the moment. There was no audience, no performance. Life was not lived for approval. It was lived because it was happening. Even loneliness felt different. It was quieter, less overwhelming. People sat with their thoughts longer, sometimes uncomfortably. But in that discomfort, self-awareness grew. Reflection was unavoidable. There was no endless distraction to escape it. Joy was less dramatic, but more stable. Happiness came from repetition. Familiar streets, familiar voices, familiar routines. Anticipation stretched pleasure across time. You looked forward to things instead of consuming them instantly. Waiting was part of happiness. Time did not rush past unnoticed. It accumulated. And because it accumulated, life felt dense, even when it was simple. When technology later entered everyday life, it did not arrive as an enemy. It arrived as help, convenience, speed. But with that speed came fragmentation. Attention split, presence weakened. Moments became transitional, always leading to the next interruption. People became reachable everywhere, yet harder to truly know. The world gained connection, but lost depth. The era before phones was not special because it was perfect. It was special because it allowed people to be incomplete, unavailable, unreachable without fear. That distance protected identity. You were not required to respond instantly, perform constantly, or explain your absence. You simply existed, fully, and that existence, unmeasured and uninterrupted, shaped a way of being that feels increasingly rare. The shift did not feel dramatic when it happened. No one announced that everyday life was about to change forever. It arrived quietly, wrapped in convenience, one device at a time, one shortcut at a time. Phones promised connection, speed, and efficiency, and they delivered exactly that. But they also changed how people experienced being alive. Time became fragmented. Attention became divided. Presence became optional. Waiting, once normal, turned into irritation. Silence, once peaceful, turned into something to escape. Being unreachable, once expected, became a source of anxiety. The world before phones did not feel empty. It felt complete. Days had natural endings. Conversations ended without needing follow-ups. Thoughts were allowed to finish. Today, nothing truly ends. Messages wait. Notifications linger. Even rest feels temporary. The old world did not demand constant productivity or visibility. There were no metrics measuring worth, no pressure to capture every moment. Value came from participation, not exposure. You were known because you were present in real spaces, not because you were constantly visible everywhere. Community existed because people shared physical time, not platforms. When life accelerated, something subtle was lost. Relationships multiplied but weakened. Information exploded, but understanding shrank. People became connected across distances, but disconnected from the moment they were in. The cost was not obvious at first. It was emotional, psychological. People felt busier, but less fulfilled. Available, but unseen. The past was not better because it was flawless. It was better because it respected limits. It accepted that humans are not designed to process everything, respond instantly, or be present everywhere at once. Those limits created balance. They protected mental space. They allowed identity to form without constant comparison. This story is not an argument against technology. It is a reminder that progress should not erase what makes life feel human, that speed should not replace meaning, that presence cannot be recreated once it is lost. Somewhere along the way, everyday life stopped being enough. Stillness became suspicious. Boredom became a problem to solve. And yet, those quiet spaces were once where people felt grounded. The world before phones is gone. It will not return. But understanding it matters. Because what we choose to protect now will decide what disappears next. One day, our own everyday lives will feel just as distant, just as unreachable. And the question will not be what technology gave us. It will be what it took without us noticing.